So with the release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on PC have come some really cool things like mods that allow you to add Zack and Sephiroth to your party, as well as control everyone in your party one right after another. It's nuts. But now we are getting people who are digging through the files and finding some original script that was not used in the final game that leads to some really cool scenarios that unfortunately didn't make it into the final copy of Rebirth, including things like Cid and Vincent joining the party in the final battle against Sephiroth. So we're going to take a look at some of these cool findings in today's video, and if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here and you'd like to stick around and help support the channel, you can subscribe, and as always, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. So this information is coming to us transcribed by the Shinra Archaeology Department on Twitter. Again, I highly recommend you guys give them a follow. They do some really great work over there. But the actual information itself has been dug up by Twitter user Jordan B. Tucker. So thanks to Jordan and the Shinra Archaeology Department for bringing this really cool information to us that is genuinely really interesting. And of course, it goes without saying there will be massive spoilers in this video for the original FF7 and Rebirth. So initially, from the rough draft of text that have been found in the game, it looks like Cloud and the entire party at the Forgotten Capital would have gone through the portal together, and we would have seen Cloud reach Aerith. Everyone would have been watching him, which I think is how it was in the original game. And as the party watches Cloud fight through the Whispers, we do have some text from some of the different characters. Red 13 saying, "Don't let them win." Kate Sith saying, "Fight Cloud." Yuffie saying, "Come on, get up." And then this entire time, Aerith is praying like she is in the final game, but then we have the moment where Cloud lifts up his sword and is about to strike Aerith down, and the entire party would see this. Tifa yelling out Cloud's name, and Barrett saying, "What the hell are you doing?" Eventually, Cloud would fight off the Whispers and put the sword down, but then we would have Sephiroth show up, and in that moment Cloud would yell no to try and deflect Sephiroth's blade, to which Aerith would have responded by saying thank you, which then leads everything to play out as it did initially, where Aerith would have been killed. But that's really interesting to see that they kind of would have done it the way the original game did it, by having everybody go through the portal and witness Cloud almost murk Aerith, but then actually see, yeah, it was Sephiroth. And I actually do like the way it ended up in the final game, because one of the biggest pieces of narrative that's driving this trilogy forward is Cloud being the unreliable narrator. And if Cloud goes in there by himself, the rest of the party doesn't know what happens. They don't know how Aerith dies. All they have to go on is what Cloud would tell them. And this really sets up some really great stuff for part 3, where Sephiroth just starts to talk to Cloud and reveal some of the truth to him by saying, yeah, you're just a puppet. You're nothing more than a puppet. You're useless. And then to kind of make things even darker, he can tell Cloud, oh yeah, and by the way, at the Forgotten Capital, you're the one who killed Aerith. It wasn't me. You just lost control, you had a fit of rage, and you stabbed her, and now she's dead. So that's on you. Which is a great narrative thing, because now Cloud, who is somebody who is not well, he's remembering things he shouldn't remember. He's forgetting things he should know. He's been having these crazy episodes. He's gonna turn and look to Tifa for answers like, hey, is he telling the truth? Did I actually kill Aerith? But Tifa's not gonna know. Tifa wasn't there. She didn't see what actually happened to Aerith, and neither did the rest of the party. And to Tifa, she's been watching a close friend slowly lose it more and more and more. He tried to kill her earlier in Gungaga, and he almost walked off a ledge in Corel, so she knows he's not well, and that's gonna make her trust Cloud a little bit less, because she's like, oh damn, I don't know, maybe Sephiroth is telling the truth here, and it really was Cloud who killed Aerith, because she almost killed me. So I quite like what we ended up with in the main game. It really reinforces the idea of the party not being able to trust Cloud. The next one takes place after the party has defeated Jenova, and it's in reference to Barrett talking about multiple worlds by saying the dialogue, oh yeah, wasn't that asshole saying something about alternate worlds? So this is the moment when Cloud has been swept away, and the rest of the party's like, we don't know where Cloud is at. Did Jenova get him? Did the Whispers get him? So the party is essentially just waiting for Cloud to show back up, and then Sephiroth Reborn Reborn would show up and they would have to do battle with him. And I believe this one is just a reference to the conversation that Cloud and Barret have in the Sleeping Forest as they're walking through it. Barret remarks to Cloud saying, you know, like, what was going on? Your eyes were twitching like crazy. And that's when Cloud comes out and says, I was in another world. Apparently there are multiple of them. To which Barret responds with a tone where he's just like, man, I don't want to hear your shit anymore. Let's just continue forward, where he's basically like, yeah, you don't have to tell me about it. I doubt I'd want to hear it anyway. So I think that line was just cut out. Maybe it wasn't even necessary to put it in there, but it is a reference to that moment. So this next part is very bittersweet, but I completely understand why it was scrapped. And apparently Cid and Vincent would have joined the party to help you fight off Sephiroth Reborn. And if we take a look at some of the text here, we have Barret saying, yeah, you feel that? Which reminds me of that Disturbed meme with the old lady going, oh shit, do you feel that? That's not important to the video.
Do you feel that? Oh shit.
Cid, who is there, would have responded with whoa, 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 followed by Yuffie yelling Cid and Vincent's name. Vincent then would have responded, here he comes. Cait Sith says he's rebuilding himself, and Barret says, then we keep fighting. So initially, those two, Cid and Vincenzo, were supposed to join the party and help us fight Sephiroth Reborn. So I would assume that if that did take place, they would have been AI-controlled characters, much like Red 13 was in the Genova battle at the end of 7 Remake, so we wouldn't have gotten to use them, but they still would have been there fighting alongside of us. Now this is really interesting because in the final version of the game, when the party gets through the Sleeping Forest and into the Forgotten Capital, Cid is not with them. I was under the impression that Cid was probably taking care of the tiny Bronco, keeping the engines warm, maybe making some repairs, so it would make sense for him not to follow the rest of the party down that path. As we know from the game, the party does find Cloud. They venture further into the Forgotten Capital where they meet up with Vincent. He's telling them about the place, and they decide to move on further without Vincent. He stays behind. And this is when Sephiroth shows up. All the chaos starts to happen, and Vincent gets separated from the rest of the party. It's not until the party fights off the Whispers and tries to make it through that barrier that Vincent shows up, which is an incredible moment when the party is struggling to keep that portal open, and then you see Vincenzo just get in there, and he holds it open with one hand, and he looks at Cloud, and he's like, go, she needs you. To borrow a wrestling term, I marked out so hard. It was just such a cool moment, and to see Vincent get in there and be a badass, I thought was wonderful. Now this is where things get interesting, because once that barrier goes down, the party, including Vincent, runs into the capital even further. But once they reach Cloud, Aerith, and Sephiroth, we don't see Vincent. We only see some of the characters from the party, including Barret, Tifa, Yuffie, and Red. But we don't know what happened to Vincent, so either the developers forgot to write a scenario where Vincent gets left behind, or they forgot to add the character into that scene. They could have done something like maybe the party is running in and then they get separated by Whispers. Vincent then stays behind to fight them off. You could have done that, or you could have had Vincent run into the capital with the party. Sephiroth sees him and goes, oh, you're not going to be a part of this fight, and then maybe he separates Vincent from the rest of the party. You could have done something like that. Maybe they just forgot, maybe they felt it wasn't important, I don't know. But as cool as it would have been to have those two with us in the party in the fight against Sephiroth, I completely understand why they didn't do so. If you look at Rebirth, we've gotten Cloud, Barret, Tifa, and Aerith, who are carryovers from Remake, and they also did receive some reworks, Cloud in particular. Oh my gosh, Cloud is so much more fun to control in Rebirth than he was in Remake. They then added in the addition of Yuffie, as well as a fully playable and controllable Red 13 and Cait Sith. So that was a lot of work already for them to do. They probably didn't have the time and resources to fully flesh out Vincent and Cid, even if it was just for a section of the game where it was one boss battle and they were AI controlled. You don't want to half-ass the animations and abilities. You want to make sure all of this stuff is done right. So as cool as it would have been to have them there, I'm totally fine with them not being there. I would much rather they wait for the development of part 3 to fully flesh out Cid and Vincent, and then the first time we get to see them in battle, we get to actually control them. So it makes sense why they're not there. So maybe in part 3 they'll reference what happened to Vincent once they got into the capital, or maybe the developers will just be like, you saw nothing, Jedi mind trick, you never saw Vincent go into the capital, he wasn't there, you're just fooling yourself. Now this next part takes place after the battle with Genova and Sephiroth, and everyone is back in in the Forgotten Capital, presumably after Aerith's body has been laid to rest in the water. Now, in the final version of the game, Tifa has 0 dialogue from the end of that boss battle to the beginning of the game's credits. She says absolutely nothing. But apparently in the initial draft, they did have her say Aerith's name as she was sitting by the water. And this is right before Cloud looks at Tifa and says, "Tifa, come on." Now again, I actually really do like the version we got in the final game because it's so much more impactful, because Tifa says nothing. In that moment leading up to that moment specifically, Tifa has watched Cloud fall apart, do some really crazy things, commit some really insane, disturbing acts, and now she's basically reached her boiling point because they've lost Aerith, and Cloud is pretty much acting like nothing has happened. He's happy-go-lucky. So for Tifa to just look at Cloud and just them using her facial expressions to get her feelings across, and for her to not say a damn word to him, she just looks at him in utter confusion and almost disgust, at some points I think hits home way harder than if they actually had her say Aerith's name. But that's just a personal preference on my part. Now this next one completely changes the ending of Rebirth, and it has to do with the rift in the sky. So in the final version of the game, the only person that can look up into the sky and see that rift, presumably, is Cloud. And he even tells the party, like, don't look up, it's not real, it's an illusion, or something like that. And when Tifa and Barret look up, they don't see anything but the regular sky. But apparently in the initial draft, Cid would have seen this rift in the sky, and presumably everyone else would have too. So as they're having their conversation on where to find Sephiroth, where do we go? He's up north, let's go look for him. Cid would have said, "The hell's that?" Followed by, "Yo, look at the sky." To which we would have heard Aerith say, "No, you promised not to look up," which literally translates to "don't look at the sky." Yo, look at the sky. That's a horrible Southern accent. That probably offended a lot of Southern people with that. But this is super interesting because, again, this kind of goes with the initial draft idea that they seem to be running with, where the party witnesses everything and Cloud is still kind of acting weird. So they would have been able to see that rift in the sky, or at least Cid would have, and again, I presume everyone else would have too. But going down the route that they're going, again, really reinforces that unreliable narrator aspect to Cloud, and it makes the party trust him even less. Because now this dude is acting full on cuckoo. We lost Aerith and it doesn't seem to affect him. He's telling us don't pay attention to that thing in the sky when we look in the sky and there's nothing there. Cloud, you've officially launched yourself into space, man. What is going on? Which again, I think just reinforces what's going to happen in part 3, where Cloud eventually reunites with Sephiroth in the Northern Crater. He hands over the black materia. He becomes that puppet. And imagine this, it probably won't happen, but what if there was a boss battle against Cloud in that moment where he fully succumbs to Sephiroth's control and becomes a puppet, but we have one boss battle, but it's against Cloud before everyone's got to book it out of there and that big explosion happens. It's probably not going to happen, but it would be pretty nutty. And then we have the whole situation where he is essentially comatose, which I think really kind of hammers home that urgency that the party has of not only saving Cloud's life, but realizing we can't do the job without Cloud. We need him because he's one of the few people that can actually go toe-to-toe with Sephiroth, so we need to get him back and get his mind right. And the one we will end on here has to do with Rufus in the end of Rebirth. So in the final draft of the game, we see Rufus, who's been communicating with Glenn throughout the entirety of the story. It is then revealed that it is not in fact Glenn, but a clone, and then we see the image of Sephiroth, which I think is wonderful. But in the initial draft, it looks like they wanted him to go from Glenn to Rufus's father, President Shinra, instead of Sephiroth. And the dialogue that plays out here, I assume, would have taken place as Glenn transformed into President Shinra, where President Shinra would have said, "Rejoice, my dear Rufus, what need is there to search for the promised land when we can create it with our own hands? Your childhood dream is about to come true," to which Rufus would say, "But I want the real thing, not some imitation." His father then responds, "You know what they say about counting your blessings," which would have been an interesting ending. I think it's an even cooler way to kind of mess with Rufus even more, because now he's seeing his dead father, which, you know, he didn't really like his father. So maybe his father coming back would have just kind of reinforced this whole goal of the promised land. But the version we get at the end of the game, I think, is better because it does a number of things for the character of Rufus. A, he realizes, oh crap, This is Sephiroth I've been dealing with this entire time, and he's just played my ass. He's gotten me involved in a war with Wutai as a distraction, but this also feeds into the plan that Sephiroth has of getting this war going, having tons of people die, rejoin the live stream by returning to the planet, and then putting all this stress onto the live stream, effectively girdling the planet, I think is how Sephiroth describes it in Advent Children. So this goes along with Sephiroth's plan completely, but it also makes it sting a little harder for Rufus because again, he just got played, but now he's also freaking out because he's like, oh crap, Sephiroth is a threat. He's moving along much faster than we all assumed, and it kind of pushes him further down that path of we really need to take out Sephiroth now. Which leads to some really great moments in part 3 where Shinra is kind of no longer the big villain of the game. They kind of start to do some better, good stuff, working in tandem with Cloud in the party and whatnot. So all in all, the original draft I think is super interesting and cool, and it looks like maybe they were sticking closer to the vibe and structure of the original game, but they decided to deviate, which again, I really like because it really reinforces Cloud is nuts, we can't trust him, he's seeing crazy things, did he kill Aerith? And it really puts the focus on Cloud, who again is the main character, but it's still pretty interesting. So with that being said, that is the video. Let me know in the comments down below. What did you guys think of the text that was found within Rebirth that never got used, including some of those really cool scenarios with Cid and Vincent? I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.